Well, good to have you with us here on the South African Morning. President Ramaphosa is going to receive the first part of the state capture inquiry report today. It will be hand-delivered by Commission Chair Justice Raymond Zondo. But there's been calls for Zondo to rather not hand it to the President to present to Parliament. Critics have come out and said that the President is conflicted as he testified at the inquiry itself. Legal expert Benedict Phiri, good morning to you. All the best for 2022. Legally wise, is there a conflict of interest here?
I think, there probably is a small degree of a perception of a conflict of interest. The fact that the President testified at the Commission doesn't necessarily indicate that his interests that, may be spelt out by the recommendations or findings of Acting Chief Justice Zondo would actually preclude him from acting on those recommendations. So I do think there probably is a question of managing the perception of the conflict of interest, and a release to Parliament might be one of those ways, except it's not actually allowed or rather prescribed for in the terms of reference of the Commission. And I think what overlays that really is that from a governance perspective, the President and any other person in government has to act within a rational way. So when he receives that report, he has to justify what he does with it, whether he's going to act on some recommendations or others or not act on them. There has to be a proper legal justification to that. So certainly, releasing to Parliament may deal with the perception of a conflict of interest, but I don't think there is a real conflict of interest in this particular instance.
I can't help but imagine, though, that we're going to have every political party jumping up and down, though, complaining about this. The reason we're having this conversation is about UDM leader Bonta Holomisa, one of the most vocal critics about this. So even though the perception, let's move away from perception, is there any kind of legal recourse for political parties, something in the Constitution, parliamentary laws that they could stand up and put their hand up and say, we don't agree because of law so-and-so?
Yeah, I think, Gareth, the best way to really frame this is within the four corners of the terms of reference of the Commission, because the Commission really acts within that. And what happens to this report and how it's handled comes from that. And if you look at what really the Commission will be doing here, is it will be addressing executive conduct, around executive ethics and, the manner in which cabinet ministers were appointed, etc. We'll talk about governance of SOEs, and related to that is the issue of the tendering system. And then also over and above that, obviously recommendations that will come out around further criminal conduct or rather criminal proceedings that should follow from this. So when you look at that as thematically, you think of, well, if the President receives this from those particular three themes, how likely is he to be impacted and really handcuffed in what he does in maneuvering that? So, I don't think there will be much scope for recourse. I think certainly if the President doesn't act with speed and haste, or if this recommendations or the report is not made public within a reasonable space of time, certainly there will be recourse for not only political parties but civil society as a whole.
Perhaps if we can just zoom out of the President handing over this report to Parliament for a moment. You've been following the state capture report, as many of us have, since its inception, delay after delay, extension after extension. We also know that there could be some other legal challenges, people who wanted to come forward and testify, people who wanted to come forward and question witnesses as well. In a state capture inquiry like this, after the fact, once the report is handed over, it's accepted or not accepted, do you foresee any legal challenges from individuals to the state capture inquiry as a whole? Are people allowed to do that?
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see that. There have been threats of this, since the inception of this inquiry. I think I foresee that people are going to find loopholes around aspects like, the Acting Chief Justice was meant to call so-and-so, and he therefore couldn't have made a particular finding without that person's evidence. It's irrational. The constitution of the Commission itself, we know the former President himself was saying it's illegally constituted and how it came about. So I think we are going to see a few court challenges that seek to review either the Commission in its entirety or some of its finding or some of its recommendations and set them aside. I think that definitely will follow once this report is finally released.
Did you agree then with the idea that the justice himself rather hand this over? You spoke about perception a little bit earlier. Is there something in the way that the state capture inquiry report, the handover process, is framed, it's questioned, or it's phrased, that insists that the president himself has to hand this over? Do you think it was a bad decision to rather not just let Raymond Zondo, the justice himself, hand it over? From a perception perspective, it would have been easier because we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
I think certainly there's a lot to be gained from continuing the public nature of this process. So, the moment anything goes into an element of obscurity or we don't know what's happening, I think that will detract from some of the confidence. And it's not a full level of confidence that we've gained from the process, but it'll certainly detract from that. So I think, what would have been great in this situation is, what we've heard, for instance, an immediate release to the public as well. I think that would also just temper some of these perceptions around a conflict of interest and things sitting under a drawer and collecting dust, this report, and doing nothing because some of the recommendations may not suit certain people.
Perhaps we can just look at the situation regarding the former president, Benedict Phiri. I'll let you go. Former President Jacob Zuma. We know of the ongoing issues about the state capture inquiry and the former president. Now that this first part of the report is going to come out, the other parts will come out later. Can a state capture report like this have a bearing on the current court cases that the former president is facing? Is it admissible into court, considering those court cases have started?
So I think we just have to sort of think about the court cases that are ongoing. From a criminal perspective, you will recall that the only immunity you would be granted is if you actually implicated yourself in testimony at the state capture inquiry. We know that the former president hasn't done so. So if there's any further evidence that may have a bearing on the arms deal case, which, I don't think that would be the case given what we heard, but assuming there would be, certainly there would be an avenue for the state to apply to have that evidence, or rather lead that evidence in relation to his criminal conduct. With respect to the matter around his medical parole, I don't think this will have any bearing on that particular aspect of his matter. So I think, what comes out of here may have a tangential and slight impact on his current legal proceedings, but not necessarily a direct one.
I appreciate your time. I appreciate always your legal viewpoints as well. Legal expert Benedict Phiri joining us this morning, looking ahead to what's going to be the day where we see the first part of the state capture inquiry report being handed over. I'm sure we'll get a lot more reaction throughout the day.